So, we live in a world now, and maybe it's always been like this, like recency bias. Like whatever happened last night is the world. And I said this on yesterday's show. I think the Lakers will beat the Blazers in the series, but there are some problems you have to look at. The Clippers are going to beat the Dallas Mavericks in the season. They lost last night. Series is 1-1. Okay. The Clippers lost a playoff game. That means what? Did anybody think they were going to go undefeated through the playoffs? Dallas has the best young player in the NBA. Dallas has 2 top 25 players. Dallas has a coach in Rick Carlisle who's going to get Hall of Fame votes. Dallas has depth. Dallas finished 11 games above 500. Dallas is good. Folks, KD, Stephen Clay, a dynasty, had 14 playoff losses. The Heatles, LeBron, Wade, and Bosh had double that, 28 playoff losses. With LeBron, the best player in the world, Bosh in his prime, and Wade not far from it, they were pushed to 7 games in Miami. These are in series they won by the Celtics, Pacers, and Spurs. The Heatles only had 2 playoff series in 4 years they swept. It's hard, and now nobody has home court advantage. KD, Stephen Clay, the first year, they rolled through it. Last 2 years after that, it was a struggle. I mean, go back to Shaq and Kobe. Shaq and Kobe had 3 years where they're viewed as unbeatable. The second title, they were. The year before that, Shaq and Kobe were pushed to a maximum 5 games in the first round. As a number 1 seed, 5 games at the time was your first round. And they went 5 games. The year after the second year, the third year, they went to 7 games before they got to the finals. This stuff is hard. It's hard to win playoff games, and the bubble's thrown a wrench into it because generally these, the Lakers would have home court advantage, and the Bucks would have home court advantage, and the Clippers would have home court advantage. And the advantage is when you're a heavy favorite, and the Clippers are, and the Lakers are, and the Bucks are, is that you need a little juice. I mean, that's always been the thing about the first round. The favorites come in. Thank God you're at home because you're supposed to win in about 5 games. And what you need is juice. You need a little help from the crowd, and you don't have it. You got a digital board. And so it's a big advantage to the underdogs. The Bucks, the Clippers, and the Lakers are 1-3. Okay? So it's a huge, this is March Madness. It's even worse than March Madness. Even in the first round, Duke and North Carolina have more fans than Belmont and Coastal Carolina. So this is a huge advantage. I mean, we saw the Suns go 8-0, Portland play in. Teams like Memphis and the Nets, without, with not much to work with, had real advantages. Now it's just like it's playing in a gym. Underdogs got nothing to lose. Pressure's all on the favorites. And by the way, the Clippers are still trying to figure out chemistry. That's A. We all know that. We don't think their chemistry is great. B, Patrick Beverley, who averages about 26, 27 minutes a night for the Clippers. He's a really good player. He didn't play last night. They don't know when they're getting him back. And C, Paul George was bad. And Paul George is not a superstar. He has bad playoff games all the time. So the 3 teams that we think are great, we think are title teams. And I think you can throw Toronto into this, but let's just say Bucks, Lakers, Clippers. They're 1-3. And people forget this. If you go to the KD, the last year before KD got hurt in Golden State, the second year, they were pushed, the third year, excuse me. This is the KD, Steph, Clay, Draymond Warriors. They were pushed to 6 games in the first round by these Clippers, and Kawhi wasn't there yet, and Paul George wasn't there yet. That's a dynasty. And again, the Heatles had 28 playoff losses. They were pushed to 7 games 3 times in the years they won the championship. So this is, you got no home court advantage, big advantage, obviously, to the underdogs. Because the favorites in playoff series in the first round have always needed juice. They need something to lift them up. The underdogs don't. They're being told they have no chance. They don't need the juice. They're being told they have no chance to win the series. They got the juice. They got the chip on their shoulder. Favorites in the first round are sleepwalking through this thing. Milwaukee's defense now is bad. The Lakers haven't looked really energized in like 2 weeks. And last night, the Clippers, without Patrick Beverley, off night for Paul George, just didn't have it. So, everybody last night, Clippers lost to the Mavs. Mavs are a good team, 11 over 500. Luka, best young star in the game. Dallas, a real team. By the way, Dallas just set this year a record, league history, the most efficient offense ever. It's like you're not sweeping Dallas. They're a real team. But Paul George wasn't good last night, and he's up and down as a playoff guy. So the first thing that needs to be said is how your second best player plays in the playoffs matters. It's not an excuse. It's a reason. Look at the Lakers. Anthony Davis disappeared against Portland in the fourth. They lost. Milwaukee, Chris Middleton was awful. They lost to Orlando. The Clippers, Paul George last night had a stinker. They lost. By the way, Porzingis ejected Dallas game 1. They lost. Like your second best player. We stare at stars in the NBA. And I get it. It's a star-driven league. But how your second player performs is crucial in these games. You can't even Dame needed Melo to hit shots, Nurkic and CJ McCollum to be big the other night. You can't carry a team in this sport anymore. It's too many good players. The second thing is there is a massive gap between, even if they're both Hall of Famers, and LeBron and AD are, and Pippen and MJ were, there's a massive gap between stars and the second best star on a team. I mean, LeBron this year was great in the fourth. AD all year disappeared in the fourth. They'll both be Hall of Famers. Kawhi is Mr. Clutch. Paul George historically is never clutch. That's the knock on him. Giannis is a dominant, consistent MVP. Chris Middleton disappears. Games, halves. The gap between the best player on a team and the second best. I mean, I loved Chris Bosh in his prime, but the gap between LeBron and Wade was massive. I mean, Chris Bosh once had a playoff game in Miami. He didn't score a point. And what happens in these playoffs, you rely on that second best guy, and sometimes second best guys disappear. That's why they're second best guys. Big gap. I mean, a prime example. The best Robin to a Batman in league history, many people believe, is Pippen to MJ. Now you can go back and annals of basketball and argue, but for a long time, that was the argument. That's the best Robin to a Batman ever. The minute MJ went to baseball, they gave the team to Pippen. By the beginning of year 2, Scotty was unraveling. DUI, gun charge, wouldn't come off the bench, had coaching issues with... By year 2, he was unraveling. And Scotty's a Hall of Famer, one of the best slashers of all time. But the reality of Jordan is Jordan got tackled for 6 years before he won a title, 6 or 7. Jordan was literally the entire league. He carried the league. He carried Chicago. He carried his teammates. He carried his GM. He carried his owner. And Jordan handled it. Pippen by year 2, unraveling. That is the gap. So when Paul George struggles, it's not an excuse. It's a reason. The number 2 guy often is not close to the number 1 guy. And even when they're Hall of Famers, Paul George is going to get Hall of Fame votes. AD is going to be a Hall of Famer. So Scottie Pippen, Hall of Famer. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.